Last time we began chapter 5 of Division E, called Emotion and the Centers, which immediately led into a review of the chains, rounds, globes, and root races of the Earth's scheme. We tried to bring this into a better understanding. It takes a while before you really finally get a sense of how this all works together. It's all indicated here in this one very interesting illustration. However, it doesn't have the rounds, but it does have the scheme, the chains, and the globes. We then learned that by the time the fifth round, that's what actually got us into this review of chains and rounds. By the time of the fifth round is reached, 3/5 of the human family will have developed full consciousness on the lower 5 planes and will have their 5 senses fully functioning on the 3 planes and the 3 worlds, which doesn't seem like that big a deal until you look at what these senses represent. It literally means that 2/3 of humanity will be clairaudient, clairvoyant, and be able to see and hear on the higher planes, and which will have the ability to feel and determine the difference between the vibration of one's soul, one's ashram, and one's master. That's these mental sense of taste called discrimination and spiritual discernment. We then learned that the highest 2 planes will be subjugated during the remaining 2 rounds, showing the close connection between the numbers of the rounds and the subplanes on which humanity becomes conscious. So the 6th and 7th iterations of any cycle, whether it be a root race, a globe, a round, or a chain, are always synthetic, as are the highest subplanes, as shown here. Here these are the last 2 root races, are the synthesizing root races. The law of love and the law of synthesis dominate. The same thing happens in the 6th and 7th rounds. So it's really closely tied together by number. We then took a look at the 5 centers, quote, connected with the evolution and propagation of the dense physical body, which are the center at the base of the spine, the solar plexus, the throat, the heart, and the center at the top of the head, which are associated progressively with the 5 lower planes. So we have the base of the spine associated with the physical plane, the solar plexus, and the throat associated with the emotional and intuitive planes, the heart associated with the mental plane, and the top of the head associated with the atmic plane. We then learned that these centers deal fundamentally with the fire aspect and are not connected with objectivity and manifestation, but rather with force or the powers of the divine life. Next came a teaching on the location of the etheric centers of the solar logos, which are represented by the sacred planets. 2 of these are given: Venus, the heart center, and Saturn, the throat center. DK then draws an as above, so below relationship between the centers of logos and those of a human being. And finally, contrasts the difference in location of the centers of the solar and the solar logos and the sacred planetary logoi. This chart shows where these centers are in a planetary logi, and this for solar logos. And this takes us up to where we left off last time. So we'll begin this session with the statement, the heavenly men therefore have centers on 3 solar planes, a fact to be remembered. DK describes these planes in the next passage. Could we get a reader, please?
And Veronica.
You there, Anne Veronica? Might have to unmute.
Never know if they're.
You could cycle back.
Yep. So it would be Gordon. You want to read?
Okay. A, on the monadic plane, plane of the 7 rays. B, on the Buddhic plane, where the masters and their disciples form the 49 centers in the bodies of the 7 heavenly men. C, on the 4th etheric physical plane, where the sacred planets, the dense bodies in etheric matter of the heavenly men, are to be found. Here again, we can trace the microcosmic correspondence. In the human being, the centers are found on the mental plane from which originates the impulse for physical plane existence, or the will to incarnate. From thence, they can be traced to the astral level, and eventually to etheric levels, to the 4th ether, where they practically go through the same evolution that the planetary centers went through and are instrumental in bringing about objectivity, being the 4th centers.
Thank you, Gordon. Okay, first, the heavenly men therefore have centers on ... A, the monadic plane, the plane of the 7 rays. So the monadic plane is the first plane of articulated manifestation. The eddy plane, which sits above it, is called the sea of fire. It's pure spirit, not yet taken on any type of vehicle at all. So on the monadic plane, you have this place where the 1 becomes the 7. That's where the 7 subrays of the second ray come into manifestation. This is also the cosmic etheric subplane where Venus, the logoic heart center, which has a second ray monad, no coincidence there, is located. But since the monadic plane is the highest etheric subplane for the planetary logoi, it seems likely that it is also the location of the planetary head centers, since the head centers always exist in the highest subplanes. DK comments more on the location of the bodies of the heavenly men earlier in TCF. Could we get a reader, please?
Elias, you want to read?
Did you call me? I'm not sure if that was.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. It is to be observed that just as in man, the dense physical body in its 3 grades, dense, liquid, and gaseous, is not recognized as a principle, so in the cosmic sense, the physical, dense, astral, liquid, and mental gaseous levels are likewise regarded as non existing, and the solar system has its location on the fourth ether. The seven sacred planets are composed of matter of this fourth ether, and the seven heavenly men, whose bodies they are, function normally on the fourth plane of the system, the Buddhic, or the fourth cosmic ether.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next up, and we're talking now about this Buddhic plane. I should have put it after this, but there you have it. The Buddhic plane, where the masters and their disciples form the 49 centers in the bodies of the seven heavenly men. This is, it's easy to read, but if you think about it, it's really an eyebrow-raising statement because it suggests that the 49 ashrams that make up our Earth's hierarchy are each of the 49 are associated with one of the seven chakras in one of the seven heavenly men. So the 49 ashrams formed by the masters and their disciples are located on the Buddhic plane because, quote, the seven sacred planets are composed of matter of this fourth ether. Of course, the planets also have dense, unprincipled bodies, whose source is the fourth etheric subplane of the cosmic physical plane. But the principled, that is to say, living substance of the seven heavenly men is on the Buddhic plane. The 49 ashrams are affiliated with the seven heavenly men through ray and subray. Thus, for example, the seven subray ashrams of the great second ray ashram are affiliated with the seven centers in the body of that heavenly man that we know as Jupiter. We must assume that the ashrams, the liberated humanities of other planets in our solar system, are also part of these seven planetary centers, thus making these 49 planetary ashrams a common meeting place for all the human hierarchies of our solar system. Thoughts or questions? By the way, if you have any comments or questions anytime, it's always more interesting to have a dialogue going than just a lecture. So anyway, I find this very mind-blowing stuff. It's not something that I was that aware of before. The idea that, our Ray ashrams, of which we all are affiliated or gradually coming into awareness of, are directly connected to one of the centers of one of the heavenly men. Interesting stuff. I see a hand. Yes, Gordon.
So PK says like humanity is a center of the planet Earth, and the hierarchy is another center on the planet
Sure.
Earth. How does this relate to the ashrams being different centers?
Well, the ashrams are centers within the hierarchy, is how that works. So, and it's through affiliation of these ashramic centers that connect us to the seven sacred planets. My guess is that you also have the humanity and hierarchies of other planets as centers in those other planets, right? And they are associated with particular rays and subrays. For instance, our human kingdom is very much connected with the fourth ray, right, with the fifth subray. So that's not something that DK details or go into goes further into. In fact, you could miss it altogether. Let's see here. Hang on. Yeah, if you look, let me get back up here. On the Buddha plane, where the masters and their disciples form the 49 centers in the bodies of the 7 heavenly men. I mean, you could just quickly scan through this and not really realize its profound implications. And to my knowledge, it's not further developed elsewhere, this idea, this connection. Of course, the ashrams are talked about a lot in discipleship in the New Age, but this particular connection to the centers in the bodies of the 7 heavenly men, as far as I know, is not developed elsewhere. So I can't really fully answer your question, Gordon, except to say that you're right, those are centers in our earth, but we aren't a heavenly man, one of the 7 heavenly men, right? So the hierarchical, which is the first going up, the first sacred center in our earth, its 49 centers are related to the sacred centers of the heavenly men. Yes, Tom.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm a little bit confused because this is new. So let's say we have the Earth planetary hierarchy, which has 7 ashrams. Would those then be centers of those sacred planets or centers of this planet, or is it a mystery still?
Okay. These 49 centers are ashrams in the hierarchy, which is a center in our earth, right? So these 49 ashrams are, we have no more information than what you're reading right here in dark print, right? That the masters and disciples form the 49 centers in the bodies of the 7 heavenly men. This is a profound statement, and we have to try to, figure out just what this means. What he's talking about is the existence of he's talking about where the heavenly men have centers, right? And he's describing that, first of all, in the monadic plane, and now he's talking about the Buddhic plane, where these heavenly men have centers. And then here we learned that there is an association between the 49 ashrams, because how else could we define the masters and their disciples other than the 49 ashrams that they have created in the hierarchy, right? And here we learned that there's formed the 49 centers in the bodies of the 7 heavenly men. Now, if at its most extreme, I'll get to you in a minute, Joe. In its most extreme, you could say that this is literally true, that the ashrams within the hierarchy are actually these centers themselves form the 49 centers in the bodies of the 7 heavenly men, right? But, since the entire hierarchy is just one center in planet Earth, you couldn't imagine that a subset of the hierarchy, the 49 centers that make up the hierarchy, actually form the centers. It just is logically not likely that, our little insignificant Earth, and then you have an ashram in the hierarchy of that Earth, that it couldn't all by itself form a center in, say, Jupiter, right? But it could be part of the formation, along with the humanities of all the hierarchies and all the other planets who are also aligned through ray and subray with that particular center in a particular heavenly man. That's strictly hypothesis, but that's, that would make more sense than our little Earth, than the literal reading of this statement. Okay, Joe.
I didn't know I could unmute myself. I am very confused, and I'm wondering if we inserted one word, it would make it clearer. On the Buddhic solar plane, and then everything else would have the
What does that mean?
seven. Well, that would be the sun itself would have a Buddhic plane. And below that, you would have 7 planets with each of them having a Buddhic plane. And
Well,
at
it's
that
the same
point,
Buddhic
the
plane.
awesomes would be associated.
It's the same cosmic physical plane with one Buddhic plane, and the sun, as well as all the heavenly planets, the heavenly men, participate on that same Buddhic plane. There is not a separate Buddhic plane for a human being and for a planet and for the solar logos. That's the same Buddhic plane. It has a completely different meaning, right, for each of those. The Buddhic plane for the solar logos, for instance, is the very lowest threshold of existence, just like our physical plane. It doesn't have existence lower than Buddhic. In other words, it's called unprincipled, or that the lower planes are not a principle in the body of the solar logos, but it's the same Buddhic plane for everyone.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Good. Yes, I don't know who Heliosol Voice is. What's your name? So I can learn that. I'm calling on you now.
Oh, thank you. My name is Irina, and Heliosol is just my, spiritual name that was given to me a long time ago.
Okay,
Anyway.
I'm happy to call you Heliosol if that's
Thank
what you
you. Me
prefer.
happy. Yeah, me happy too.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to share something that completely blew my mind. This was meant for me to participate today, obviously, because I was like since morning waiting for this class, and I I was dabbled into the numbers as esoteric energies years ago, and I I received some incantations, I call them. And if you don't mind, I want to tell you about the number 7.
Okay, wait a minute. I would love to have this conversation with you, but we have to stay on point.
Yeah, but this is on point. I can
Okay,
probably
if it's directly related to the comments.
I at least I think, but I can just type them in the chat, and so we can go on with
Okay,
the class.
why don't we do that?
Yeah,
That would be,
thank you.
I think
I'll
that
do
would be
that.
better. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you.
I don't want to discourage you. I think it's great, but I would like to, very specifically reference the material here. And I look forward to reading your chat. Yes, Kira. You're still muted.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay, hi. So, could it be that the 49 ashrams that are associated with the planets and the rays and subrays, could that be just like set up like for communication, for energy
It certainly could
receiving
be.
and yeah.
Could be. It could be. It could just be a vibrational association. It's just that his language is so strong here. Masters and their disciples form the 49 centers in the bodies. It just seems such a powerful statement that it's a real head scratcher. I would tend to go with your interpretation. I mean, how could it be otherwise? Except for if you expand what's meant by the masters and their disciples to include all the humanities and all those ashrams, all the aligned 49 ashrams in all the planets of our solar systems. But it certainly opens up. Here is just a few words. He's given us this extraordinary teaching that he doesn't elaborate on. So that's what we're left with.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you, for your thoughts. Yeah, I think energetically associated with, if he had said that, you would just think, yeah, well, that makes sense, and that's cool. After all, the ashrams are ray ashrams. There's 7 major ray ashrams, and then there are then there are also sub ashrams for each ray ashram. Giving you a total of 49 ashrams when you include all the sub-ray ashrams. Now, some of these are very well have been active for a long time. Others are as yet not active. I would guess, for instance, that some of the first ray ashrams are yet to be very active because the first ray isn't playing as direct a part in the hierarchical expression as it will, for instance, in the next solar system. But nonetheless, we have this teaching here. Yes, Ariane. You're muted, dear. You know how to unmute yourself? It's you just click on the unmute button to your far left of your, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So when one gives one's life over beyond the ego to one of the masters of wisdom, my understanding is that one joins the ashram karmically if one has got a relationship to that person. So like Maitreya, the teacher for the age of Aquarius and the being that overshadowed Jesus and Krishna, he has his ashram, and it's with the second ray because that's the ray that is influencing the ray of love wisdom that's influencing our planet. And there are other ashrams, and people, when they become a disciple or later on an initiate, we become part of a master's particular ashram if we are so able to do so. And because the solar system and the planet is associated principally with the second ray, that's the ray of Maitreya, and the first ray is the ray of Sanat Kumara. And so no one probably in this room, maybe no one, would maybe gravitate towards that, but that ashram exists. It just means that would have a very different kind of energy than the energy of teaching, which,
right.
Francis, I don't know if I should call you Francis or Dr. Donald, I don't know.
No, don't call me. Just Francis is great.
Okay, Francis. So obviously you have a lot of second ray because of your demeanor. You're so inclusive, but also your teaching. And so that's what we see in this room. I don't know if that was helpful.
There's a predominant, yeah, it was. Thank you for your comments. So, just to recap some of the things you said, yes, we're all potentially associated with one of these 49 ashrams. It's determined by our ray makeup, both the soul ray, monadic ray, soul ray, and personality rays are going to be determinative of which ray ashram that we are ultimately associated with. And you can, as we come more into more and more awareness about ourselves, and we determine our race, then we can discern which ashram we may eventually become associated with. As you become a lesser disciple, you are taken on as a probational disciple, and you are contacted by some of the lesser initiates that are part of that ashram, and you won't even at that stage know necessarily that you're connected with that ashram. With each succeeding initiation, you come closer into the awareness. It really takes group consciousness in order to truly enter an ashram. That's the energy that dominates the hierarchy and dominates the ego orientation, right? And so when you are one with your ego at the third initiation, then you will know at that point what ashram you're affiliated with and actually start working with that ashram. Yes. So anyone else before we move on? Yeah, it's just a mind-blowing statement. It's so provocative. Okay, so we talked about that the seven heavenly men, even though they have quote unquote composed of the matter of the fourth ether, that they also have this shadow fourth ether that allows them to have a physical incarnation of these planets, and then, we just read this. And now we move on to C. Fourth etheric physical plane, we were just talking about this, where the sacred planets, the dense bodies and etheric matter of the heavenly men are to be found. For heavenly man, this subplane is composed of what's called unprincipled substance, and is thus only an anchor for planet's physical existence. There's no consciousness at this level. It's strictly you could say the etheric web that draws the dense physical material to it. Okay. And next up, hang on a second, I want to take a quick look at the chats. Okay, yeah, thank you for this. I appreciate your involvement. Okay, yeah, so I encourage you, as we go along, to read the chats and also to speak up whenever you have any questions or anything to say at all. Okay, so next, here again, we can trace the microcosmic correspondence. In the human being, the centers are found on the mental plane from which originates the impulse for physical plane existence, or the will to incarnate. So, just as the incarnation of a solar logos emanates from the cosmic mental plane, so the incarnation of a human being emanates from the systemic mental plane. As above, so below. And finally, from thence, they can be traced to the astral level. We're talking about cosmic, and eventually to etheric levels, to the fourth ether, where they practically go through the same evolution that the planetary centers went through and are instrumental in bringing about objectivity, being the force centers. So not only do the centers form the path of release from objective centers, objective existence, that's how we tend to think of the centers, right? It's the pathway up into release. through the rising of the Kundalini. But they also play a part in the, quote, bringing about of objectivity. When we consider the fourth etheric subplane centers, the base of the spine, the generative organs, the solar plexus, and the spleen, we see that they are all involved in sustaining physical existence, right? So you can see the direct relation. This is the fourth subplane of the physical plane systemically, whereas this, where my arrow is here, is the fourth subplane of the cosmic physical plane. That's where the relationship between the two are. They're both generative, for one for planetary solar loci, the other for a human being. Okay. All right. Next up, could we get a reader, please?
Janet, do you want to read?
Sure. The centers are formed entirely of streams of force pouring down from the ego, who transmits it from the monad. In this, we have the secret of the gradual vibratory quickening of the centers as the ego first comes into control or activity, and later, after initiation, the monad, thus bringing about the changes and the increased vitality within these spheres of fire or of pure life force. The centers, therefore, when functioning properly, form the body of fire, which eventually is all that is left, first to man in the three worlds and later to the monad. This body of fire is the body incorruptible or indestructible spoken of by St. Paul, and it is the product of evolution of the perfect blending of the three fires, which ultimately destroy the form.
Thank you. Okay, first, this is another one of those statements. The centers are formed entirely of streams of force pouring down from the ego, who transmits it from the monad. The statement is unequivocal. The centers are made of monadic force. You could say stepped down monadic force. And this force is not to be confused with the latent fire of matter that rises up from the base of the spine, nor are the centers made of etheric substance, which is what we tend to think. The etheric body, the etheric centers, right? But the centers themselves, those fiery wheels, are actually made of streams of force pouring down from the ego, who transmit them from the monad. So though these centers are found within the etheric body and are separated by the protective webs made of etheric matter, they are themselves these higher streams of force. Compare this statement with one made on page 138 in TCF, where DK says, "We must always bear in mind that the fires from the base of the spine and the splenic triangle are fires of matter. We must not lose this recollection nor get confused. They have no spiritual effect and concern themselves solely with the matter in which the centers of force are located." It's the key to the disparity between these two statements is in that last phrase. Though not definitive, this last phrase, they, the base of the spine and pranic centers, concern themselves solely with the matter in which the centers of force not are formed, but are located, which suggests that there is an area in which the centers are held, that is made of, that those areas are made of etheric substance, but which is not to be confused with the fiery substance of the centers themselves. Okay, you get the difference there? Any thoughts or ideas about that? Okay, next up. In this, we have the secret of the gradual vibratory quickening of the centers as the ego first comes into control or activity. The secret being that the centers naturally respond to soul contact because they are made of a similar egoic stream of force as that which is being contacted. Like attracts like, resulting in a vibratory quickening and thus anchoring soul force within the etheric body. I mean, it only makes sense that if the centers were themselves, those fiery discs, were just, systemic etheric substance, there would be nothing in them that would draw the soul down into activate those centers. But they are in fact made of the same substance that the ego itself is made of, right? And as a result of that, you have this quote unquote gradual vibratory quickening of the centers. That becomes possible. Yes, Gordon. Need to unmute.
Okay, took a little while before I could unmute.
It's okay. Go ahead.
So these streams of force coming down from the ego, are those kind of related to like the life thread and the consciousness thread and the creativity thread that come from the ego?
Well, the sutratmas that you described, the three aspects of the sutratma, are made of etheric matter. However, that which they carry is of this force energy from the ego and ultimately the monad. The monad connects to the heart center. That's the life aspect. That is why we can sustain life on the physical plane. So even though the sutratma itself is made of etheric matter, it's literally part of the etheric body. That which it carries is a step down energetic that comes directly from the monad. And the same thing with the head center and the consciousness aspect, which is, the other linking sutratma. It's actually threefold, and that comes from the ego. But all of it is ultimately stepped down from the monadic force. Does that answer your question?
So does the sutratma, which is composed of the etheric matter, then form a channel for these forces streaming down?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Right. And, in building the antakarana, we become consciously aligned with and aware of these energies. We kind of retrace the path that is set by those sutratmas. In fact, if it wasn't for the sutratmas, we wouldn't be able to build an antakarana because we follow that line back to the monastic permanent atom. Okay, Tom. Tom, you're still muted.
Unmute.
Oh, there you
Can
go.
you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is interesting. I have always pictured it that way, that the streams of force from the monad and from the soul, they come through the life thread and the consciousness thread, and then they would go through the permanent atoms, and from there they would go to the chakras on different bodies. And this is the way that the whole concept, the wholeness is kind of controlled or energized from above.
Energized. Yeah.
Is that
Incarnation becomes
one big-
possible through both. You know, it's passes through the permanent atoms that information, quote unquote, then determines the nature and quality of the incarnation. And of course, part of that is going to be the satramans. Yes, Joe.
I'm unmuting problems. I'm trying to simplify this in my mind. And so what came to me was I build a lighted house and therein dwell.
Yep.
And I'm separating this in my mind and saying the house itself would be etheric, physical. The lighted would depend upon the antakarana and the energy flowing from the monad to the soul to the house.
Yeah, I like that. You can add to that the activation and energy demonstrated by the chakras would be part of that light, right? Because you literally glow with the light of the chakras, which, you know, we're learning here is actually the light of the ego, which has in turn stepped down the energy of the monad. So yeah, I like that. That's a good insight into those Cancerian keywords, right?
An added insight that I think of is that one could have built the lighted houses, plural, the whole system, and that something unusual could trigger the energy to begin flowing.
Like what?
The vibration could begin to come in.
Well,
and
that's
be
right.
noticed.
Yeah, you could, you know, for instance, if you had contact with a higher being like a master, you know, like when Alice Bailey, you know, when the Master DK just showed up at her house and walked into her study, you know, you can bet that her centers responded to that, you know, and I'm sure that there is, you know, that kind of controlled dispensation. But as we know, ultimately, that is done at initiation. You know, this is, it's the result of our own effort, first through purification, you know, and through service. And then we come to a threshold where the centers are literally touched by the rod of initiation and greatly stimulated. And that allows us to move to another level field of consciousness or add it to where we've been before. So that would be the most common example of that, though there's certainly going to be lesser versions of that, you know. I once had a meditation, you know, with just happened to be sitting in a small group with a woman who's called Amaji, who was from India a few decades ago. And I had this most extraordinary meditation. It was amazing. And I'm sure that the room itself was stimulative through her, you know, that she flooded the whole room with a type of mild stimulation that allowed us all to focus more intensely on the spirit. Yes, Ariane. Mute. Everybody, anybody that plans on speaking, yes. Anybody who plans on speaking, locate their mute switch.
It's
We could probably save 5 minutes.
Francis.
Yeah.
It's set up that I'm asking him to unmute just because.
Oh, as a security measure.
Yeah, I mean, I see that
Right.
everyone in here is recognizable, so I could just
Why don't
enable
you go
it
over
for
to the
now.
other? Yeah, why don't we
All right,
suspend that? You know,
it's set now.
you know what he's talking about? We get crashed very occasionally, but it's usually in the beginning. And, you know, then we have unwanted audio, unwanted people saying horrible things and stuff like that. So that's why I didn't realize that was part of the delay. So now it should be easier and more direct. So in future, maybe what we'll do is have that in place for the first 5 minutes or so, and then pull it and hope for the best. Anyway, Ariane, what'd you have?
Yes. So yeah, it just shows that when a woman like that can fill the room with her higher consciousness, and the size of the space of the room is also diagnostic of the stature of the person. But at any rate, I want to ask a question, and you're very lucky to have an experience like that, it seems to me. Was that when we look at our genetically determined vehicle, and down to the ancestry, and epigenetics going through the DNA, I'm wondering how that is
Hmm.
translated into the permanent atom. So that's to say, if the expression of who I am this lifetime is partially limited or determined by my DNA, what aspect of that genetic predispositioning is going to end its way up into the
The permanent
three
atoms.
permanent atoms, if at all? And that's
Yeah,
my
I think they're definitely related. DK never addresses that question, as far as I know. You know, the how hard a link is that? But you have situations where you have, for instance, two brothers or a brother in a system, and they're widely different in consciousness. I mean, I can think of people, brothers and sisters and brothers, where there's a huge separation in their consciousness. So I think that the familial, the DNA aspect, is largely karmic. We tend to incarnate in groups, and part of those groups are spiritual groups. I think increasingly so as we turn towards spirit. Um, I live in an area where there's 20 or 30 people in my immediate neighborhood who I've studied spiritually with almost all my life, sometimes some much more intensely than others, right? Um, and I feel very fortunate for that. None of them are my siblings at all, So you have group, uh, you have circles of acquaintances that incarnate together, and you have circles of family that incarnate as a result of karma, and sometimes those two circles uh, interrelate. But it doesn't seem to be a hardwired thing where you have the permanent atoms demonstrating through, the DNA, for instance. But I do think there is a connection because, for instance, certain opportunities are afforded for those who uh, incarnate into certain environments, and those opportunities can lead to um, uh, spiritual contact, and where you have the leisure to do spiritual study, or you're born, if you're even luckier, you're born near an ashram in India where there's a sitting master, and you learn about that master as a child and see them and become their student in later life. So there's all levels of how that can work. Okay, it's really a fascinating, concept. We don't
But
have,
I'm asking something very specific also. I'm asking, so one has like a vehicle that's in part circumscribed by one's karmic, and by one's genetic precursors. I'm wondering if those sheaths or those colorations get included in the permanent atoms, or if they're just like basically a temporary artifact of how one's consciousness expresses itself in any one lifetime, if you can answer that.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Um, what the permanent atoms hold is the quality aspect of the three sheaths, right? They don't carry the specificity, but to the degree that your DNA represents that quality, or you could say an example of demonstrating that quality, to that extent, you could say that the permanent atoms are connected to the DNA. But it's much more subjective. The permanent atoms are a much more subjective configuration than the literal DNA is. Maybe Jerry will answer this for us. Yes, Jerry.
Hi, I just wanted to comment on the issue that Ariane's raised here. And one of the interesting statements that Tibetan made about chakras is that at the eight, and he's very specific, at 21, the chakras awaken to the level that they were at in your previous incarnation. And that the implication that he's making here is that not only do the permanent atoms adjust and change through lives, but so do our chakras.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I think that as you know, we take initiations, the chakras evolve quite a bit as well, which seems to be a little more specific and concrete than the quality of the permanent atoms.
But that's carried then, for instance, if you take an initiation in life, then that quality of the sheaths changes, and that is then held in the permanent atoms. It does affect the sheaths, the nature of the sheaths. And DK makes statements like, you have to be in really good health to take an initiation. If you're sickly, you can't withstand the force of the mental, astral, etheric vehicles which are present at the initiation, returning to the physical, because it has a very impactful. It's very impactful when that happens. So that's why initiations sometimes have to be put off, until the form is, more vibrant, more hardy, you could say. So just plain good health does figure into it. Of course, you can't get there by good health alone, but you need that in order to survive or to withstand the vibration of the return of the three sheaths into the physical. There's a specific section in TCF much later in the book that describes just that I was describing. I can't, Ariane, I can't completely address your question because as far as I know, DK doesn't talk that much about the interrelation between DNA and the permanent atoms. But, we can surmise, and I think we have talked about some of the possibles, but it's certainly, as I said before, you can have two brothers. One of them becomes a criminal and, the other becomes a saint. So clearly the DNA is not that determinative, because since they would share so much of the DNA in those two cases, right? But nonetheless, I do think there is a connection. So, sorry, I couldn't give you a more complete answer. So any other questions? Okay, next up, and later, after initiation, the monad. So the whole sentence is, In this, we have the secret of the gradual vibratory quickening of the centers as the ego first comes into control or activity, and later, after initiation, the monad. So by stimulating contact with the three inner petals of the egoic lotus, and this happens, by the way, even as we unfold the outer petals, there's with each aligned petal, there is a, even though the petals don't literally open, there is a stimulation of those inner petals. Or maybe more accurately would say the stimulation of the outer petals that open comes from those inner petals. So initiation progressively facilitates monadic contact through the stimulation of these inner petals, especially after the third initiation, thus intensifying the vibratory activity of the higher centers. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Joe, you want to read?
The first faint tremor of the impact of monadic destiny, I know not how else to express this concept, makes itself felt, but is registered only by the soul of the initiate and on the level of soul consciousness. It is never registered by the man on the physical plane who is taking the first initiation. His brain cannot respond to this high vibration.
Thank you, Joe. So you can see the relationship here, right? The monad is active even at the first initiation, but it's not experienced by the initiate, but rather by the soul of the initiate, right? It's an interesting teaching. So also keep in mind that, quote, that the, quote, gradual vibratory quickening both stimulates and is facilitated by the stimulation of the fifth and sixth spirale, right? Which come forth as we make greater soul contact. Next, thus bringing about changes and increased vitality within these spheres of fire or of pure life force. So again, he's telling us what these chakras are made of, right? Fire, pure life force. Thus bring about changes and increased vitality within these spheres of fire, pure life force. These changes include increased heat and rotation, eventually resulting in fourth dimensional rotation or wheel turning upon itself. Sphere of fire, of pure life force, I think is a beautiful and succinct definition of the centers at a higher stage of evolution. Next up, the centers, therefore, when functioning properly, form the body of fire, which eventually is all that is left, first to man in the three worlds, and later to the monad. So this body of fire, we learned at the top of the paragraph, we can't say this too often, is formed entirely of streams of force pouring down from the ego who transmits it to the monad. The phrase "when functioning properly" suggests that one's body of fire is the end result after the impurities and separating webs have been burned away. The phrase "all that is left, first to man in the three worlds" suggests that an initiate of the third and fourth degrees still working in the world possess a functioning body of fire. In the later degrees, when an initiate is more fully identified with the monad and has thus transcended the need to incarnate, he or she can, if needed, utilize his or her body of fire to build a Mayavarupa. Next, This body of fire is the body incorruptible or indestructible, spoken of by St. Paul, and is the product of evolution of the perfect blending of the three fires, which ultimately destroy the form. So the three fires are the combined latent and pranic fires, the fire of mind, and the descended fire of spirit. The King James Version of 1 Corinthians 15:53 states, "For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality." The verse that follows continues the story. "So when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory." Okay. Next up, could we get a reader, please?
Kira.
When the form is destroyed, there is left this intangible spiritual body of fire, one pure flame, distinguished by 7 brilliant centers of intenser burning. This electric fire is the result of the bringing together of the two poles and demonstrates at the moment of complete at-one-ment the occult truth of the words, "Our God is a consuming fire." 3 of these centers, excuse me, are called major centers, as they embody the 3 aspects of the threefold monad: will, love, and intelligence. Number 1, the head center. Number 2, the heart center. Number 3, the throat center.
Okay, for some reason, if you look over here to the right, you'll see that I missed, I'm only discovering this now, I missed, it should read the head center, the monad, will or power, the heart center, the ego, love, and wisdom, and the throat center, the personality, activity, or intelligence. So my mistake, apologies on that. And also, I should have this citation of the Bible here, which is Deuteronomy 4:24 and Hebrew 12:29. These two quotes. Okay, so first, when the form is destroyed, there is left this intangible spiritual body of fire, one pure flame, distinguished by 7 brilliant centers of intenser burning. In this case, the form destroyed is the causal body. The spiritual body of fire would be, for the newly liberated fourth initiate, made up of substance of the cosmic ethers, specifically Buddhic plane substance, with the 7 brilliant centers of intenser burning, the corresponding chakras in the Buddhic sheath. At this point, the initiate is, for the first time, immersed in the life aspect, in pure livingness, and thus achieves planetary consciousness because the planetary logi also have their etheric sheaths on this plane. And, to just relate this back to that teaching about the 49 ashrams being literally making up the centers in the 7 heavenly men, right? You can see if you are functioning as a body of fire, that you could see how that the vibration of the particular center that you are related to would be in yourself a pure fiery essence, which would then relate to that the center in the heavenly man that you're participating with in the ashram. It's, it's really extraordinary ideas connected with this. Okay, next, this electric fire is the result of the bringing together of the two poles and demonstrates at the moment of complete at-one-ment the occult truth of the words, our God is a consuming fire. So the two poles are spirit and matter, the latter being that which is consumed by the former. This is the sattvic phase, represented by the flaming swastika, resulting in obscuration or pralaya of the form aspect, but leading into this new livingness of the spirit, of identification with the spirit. Next, the three of these centers are called major centers, as they embody the three aspects of the threshold: monad, will, love, and intelligence. The head center, the monad, will or power. The heart center, the ego, love and wisdom. The throat center, the personality, activity, or intelligence. So here we learn what is possibly the true reason that the head, heart, and throat centers are called the major centers. This reason being that they embody the three aspects of the monad, which demonstrate through the spiritual triad. The head center through the Atmic permanent atom, the heart center through the Buddhic permanent atom, and the throat center through the mental permanent atom. Okay, next up, could we get a reader, please?
Kirsten, do you want to read?
Yes. The other two centers have to do primarily with the etheric body and with the astral plane. The throat center synthesizes the entire personality life and is definitely connected with the mental plane. The three planes and the two higher planes, and the three centers with the two other centers, the heart and head. Yet, you must not forget that the center at the base of the spine is also a synthesizer, as would normally be expected, if it is recognized that the lowest plane of all manifestation is the point of deepest reflection. This lowest center, by synthesizing the fire of Kundalini and the pranic fires, eventually blends and merges with the fire of mind, and later with the fire of spirit, producing thus consummation.
Thank you. Okay. First, the other two centers have to do primarily with the etheric body and with the astral plane. So, he was talking about three major centers, and now he's talking about the other two centers. So let's take a look at MDR's notes on this statement, just this one statement. Okay, reader, please.
Marianne, you want to read?
If we wish to conceive how the basal center may be related to the etheric body, we need to consider the number 4, the fourth ether of the systemic etheric plane is the level upon which the base of the spine center can be found. The symbol for the base of the spine is the cross within the circle, indicating the 4 petals of the lowest chakra. Through the number 4, a number of form and of anchoring, and through the base of the spine, the human being is anchored in vitality and is able to sustain life on the dense physical plane through this etheric anchorage. The relationship of the solar plexus center to the astral plane is well known.
Okay, so he's just talking about the base of the spine and the solar plexus, which he didn't comment much on. So those are the other two centers that have to do primarily with the etheric body and with the astral plane. Next up, the throat center synthesizes the entire personality life and is definitely connected with the mental plane. The throat center, ruled by Saturn, is the nexus, both third ray, for the creative activity of the third aspect, representing the positive pole of the sacral center. DK tells us later in TCF that, quote, the throat center is situated in the lower part of the throat and properly belongs to the torso and not to the head. Next, the three planes and the two higher planes and the three centers with the two other centers, the heart and head. So here's a chart that describes this phrase, right? Illustrating, it shows in green the base of the spine, solar plexus, and throat on the etheric, astral, and mental planes, respectively, followed in blue by the heart and crown chakras on the Buddhic and Atmic planes. These all have their correspondences on the etheric subplanes, as shown here, thus suggesting that the throat center on the third subplane of the mental, astral, and physical planes is vibrationally related to the mental plane. The heart center on the second subplane of each etheric plane is vibrationally related to the Buddhic plane, and the head center on the first subplane is vibrationally related to the Atmic plane. You know, this isn't normally the way we think of these centers, as having these direct correspondences to the planes of the cosmic physical plane. But DK is pointing out these energetic correspondences here. Next up, yet we must not forget that the center at the base of the spine is also a synthesizer, as would normally be expected, if it recognized that the lowest plane of all manifestation is the point of deepest reflection. The seventh plane reflects the synthesizing highest plane by means of the seventh ray, which makes manifest the will to be of the monad. Thus, the base of the spine center creates a synthesis upon the physical plane of the forces pouring through the three permanent atoms into manifestation, making possible a human being's incarnation into a physical body. You see how this works? Thus, there's the base of the spine working on the fourth etheric. Here's the base of the spine center at each level. Working on the fourth etheric subplane of the physical plane that enables spirit to descend fully into matter. Okay. Next, the lowest center, by synthesizing the fire of Kundalini and the pranic fires, eventually blends and merges with the fire of mind, and later with the fire of spirit, producing thus consummation. We spent a few webinars exploring this triple merging, which leads to the descent of the fire of spirit. In brief, the latent and Kundalini fires merge at a temporary center between the shoulder blades, which then ascends to the Alta Major. But let's do a quick review. Could we get a reader, please?
Yeah, do you want to read?
The other fire of matter, the dual fire, is attracted upward and merges with the fire of mind through a junction affected at the Alta Major center. This center is situated at the base of the skull, and there is a slight gap between this center and the point at which the fires of matter issue from the spinal channel. Part of the work the man who is developing thought power has to do is to build a temporary channel in etheric matter to bridge the gap. This channel is the reflection in the physical manner of the antaskarana that the ego has to build in order to bridge the gap between the lower and higher mental, between the causal vehicle on the third subplane of the mental plane and the monastic permanent atom on the first subplane. This is the work that all advanced thinkers are unconsciously doing now. When the gap is completely bridged, man's body becomes coordinated with his mental body, and the fires of mind and of matter are blended. It completes the perfecting of the personality life, and as earlier said, this perfecting brings a man to the portal of initiation. Initiation being the seal set upon accomplished work. It marks the end of one lesser cycle of development and the beginning of the transference of the whole work to a still higher spiral.
Thank you. Okay, give me just a moment to catch up on something. Okay. Yes, thanks, Tia. Okay, hopefully that review helped. Next up, could we get a reader, please?
Tom, do you want to read?
Yes, if you hear.
Yes, we can hear you, Tom. Go ahead.
Okay. We must disabuse our minds of the idea that these centers are physical things. They are whirlpools of force that swirl etheric, astral, and mental matter into activity of some kind. Because the action is rotary, the result produced in matter is a circular effect that can be seen by the clairvoyant as fiery wheels situated 1 in the region of the spine, the lowest part, 2 between the ribs just below the diaphragm, 3 in the region of the left breast, 4 in the center of the throat, 5 just above the top of the head.
Thanks, Tom. So first, we must disabuse our minds of the idea that these centers are physical things. They are whirlpools of force that swirl etheric, astral, and mental matter into activity of some kind. This reminds me of the aphorism, to be in it, but not of it. Though the centers are not quote unquote physical things, that is, made of the substance of the sheaths in which they reside, they nonetheless both activate and animate these sheaths. I hope you understand the duality here. You have etheric bodies on all three levels, all three sheaths, mental, astral, and physical sheaths, which house these extraordinary centers of force, which are not etheric in and of themselves. They're housed in the etheric body, but they themselves, here again, he's telling us these are not physical things, meaning etheric, they're whirlpools of force that act on, that swirl the etheric, astral, and mental matter into activity of some kind. Okay. Next, because the action is rotary, the result produced in matter is a circular effect that can be seen by the clairvoyant as fiery wheels. Later in TCF, DK adds to this description, quote, these centers are recognized also as focal points of active force, manifesting to the vision of the clairvoyant as fiery wheels or the flaming petals of a lotus. Next, in the region of the spine, the lowest part, DK describes this chakra earlier in TCF. Could we get a reader, please?
And Veronica, are you there?
In the physical body, we have the fires of the lower nature, the animal plane, centralized at the base of the spine. They are situated at the spot which stands in relation to the physical body as the physical sun to the solar system. The central point of heat radiates in all directions, using the spinal column as its main artery, but working in close connection with certain central ganglia wherever located and having a special association with the spleen.
Okay. So it has a special association with the spleen because these two centers, along with the splenic center, work with the two fires of matter, latent fire and prana. And that takes us up to where we have to stop today.